Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Between Sessions with Berries. We have a very interesting guest today, Jonathan Llamas. Jonathan Llamas is a psychiatric nurse practitioner, founder of Mind and Heart, and an award-recognized voice in nursing and mental health. His work sits at the intersection of internal dialogue, faith, evidence-based care, and cultural humility, especially within Asian communities. Jonathan, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here today to talk about what you're doing, what you're offering to the mental health community, and how you're helping other nurse practitioners learn how to walk this path too, particularly in the Asian community. So thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks, Kim, for having me.
You're welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to this place where you want to educate other nurse practitioners and providers around particularly the Asian community and the mental health crisis that's going on there?
Well, a little bit about myself. I've been working in healthcare for the past 13 years. If you can believe that, I started my career as a registered nurse in 2013. And since then, I've been very fortunate to work in different areas in nursing. I started off in ICU, and then I really found my home when I started working in psychiatry and mental health, and then obviously working with the psychiatrists, as well as the advanced practice nurses and the clinical staff. It really inspired me to pursue higher education. So I graduated with my Doctor of Nursing Practice in 2019 from Loma Linda University. And then obviously in 2020, we all know what happened. The pandemic happened. And so we were just kind of thrown in there, and all of us were having to navigate through the shared trauma together. But during that time, I felt it was an amazing opportunity to not only be of service to everyone who needed mental health care, but I started to see different trends and just see how that collective trauma really resurfaced a lot of other people's trauma that they maybe have kept in hiding or kept in silence for a long time. And so that was really a turning point that I've seen, and not just in the Asian community, but also pretty much all the people from different various backgrounds. You can see that we've all had to cope with it in our own way. And so having social media, especially Instagram, it really gave me a platform to really talk about what are ways that we can do to help better cope and navigate through these trauma responses. And as a result of that, I've been very fortunate to have grown a following there, and using my voice to be able to continue to educate and empower not only my patients, but also other healthcare professionals who are in the mental health space.
Wow, so interesting. So do you think it was 2020 and the pandemic and all of that that led to this, looking at your content, led to this internal dialogue that you talk about, faith, cultural identity, that intersection of all of that together? Is that where it started, or were you always in that direction with the way you were doing things and handling mental health?
So growing up in a obviously Filipino background, faith has always been a huge protective factor for me. And growing up, understanding that, especially for me, I don't know if you're aware, but I actually failed nursing school the very first time. I didn't actually, a lot of people may or may not know that about me, but I was actually kicked out of the very first nursing school that I was enrolled in because of the fact that my grades were very, very low. It was under a 2.0 GPA. I even spoke with a advisor, and they told me that I wouldn't amount to anything because they felt that nursing wasn't something that I could be successful in. And they said, you should just quit while you're ahead. And I could have listened to that advisor's quotes, and I could have listened and took that to heart. But there was something about, again, being driven to something bigger than myself, being driven to purpose. And again, I didn't know what God was maybe calling me to do, but I chose to use that as motivation and as fuel, and I really took it upon myself to apply myself. So when I applied to another nursing school, they really allowed me the opportunity to redefine who I was and redefine and challenge the type of person that I thought I was, and then understanding that I'm actually more capable than what I initially thought I was. And obviously, long story short, I was able to graduate, and that really gave me the confidence to understand that you are what you say you are what you believe, and having faith, understand that you are drawn to a higher purpose, a higher calling. I found that to be very complementary, especially for maybe individuals who want to pursue healthcare, but maybe they're not sure if they're maybe cut out to be because they don't think that they have the grades. Coming from someone like myself, I didn't have the grades, but if it's really meant for you and if you're really called in this profession, then I do believe that it's going to work itself out. That's the reason why I use my testimony as a way to hopefully encourage people that as long as you have today, your story is not yet over. You have the ability to kind of change the trajectory of your life. You just have to be willing and humble enough to understand that life is a journey, and we have to be willing to learn from our mistakes, but also be open enough to understand that we also have to take it upon ourselves to do the best that we can with the data that we're given.
So many people in our field, it's like dictated by like, can you pass the test?
Correct.
Can you get through the classes? Can you take statistics in my case? Like that was such a nightmare, statistics. And I've interviewed somebody that helps therapists specifically take their licensing exams because they failed them over and over and over again. And it's so easy to just say, you know what, I just can't do this. But it's so good to hear people like you talking about this out loud, because it's like, it is literally your calling. Like a test score is like keeping you from being able to help humanity.
Correct.
It's so frustrating when I hear that, like you've got to pass a test or whatever, nursing school or that kind of thing, to be able to be out there and offering your services to people. So I love hearing that. I really do.
Thank you.
And in your content, you talk about that, like how this negative or self-critical internal dialogue can show up in people, in mental health struggles, relationships, professional life, that sort of thing. So I just wonder, what kind of advice do you have other than what you just said? Do you have any specific advice when you're working in your professional role with clients? How do you help them with that?
So that's a good question. And one of the things that I try to bring up and talk about whenever I have clients or individuals who are going through difficulty when it comes to their internal dialogue, I always try to remind them how we talk to ourselves, the internal dialogue. It becomes the lens from which we see the world around us. So if our inner voice is always harsh or critical, or it is rooted in fear or trauma, the world can feel unsafe. We can feel very overwhelmed. We can feel very isolated. So we have to give ourselves grace. We have to give ourselves kindness. And I always try to tell people, make sure that the dialogue that you have within yourself is compassionate. Understand that we only have the bandwidth to do what we can in these 24 hours. Our brains are not really wired to be able to take on the stress for tomorrow or next month or next year even, right? But we live in a world now where we're constantly living either in the past or in the future. We have a hard time remembering to stay present in the moment. And so I always try to tell people, show up authentically for who yourself at this time. Do the best as you can with the time that you have, and tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yeah, and you never know the struggles that you go through, like not being able to get through nursing school the first time. If you hadn't gone through that, you probably wouldn't be out here with this platform now, helping so many people feel encouraged and work through their own critical self-thoughts and all of that. So I love that. So can we maybe just shift gears a little bit and talk about the cultural factors that contribute to the stigma around seeking mental health care, particularly in the Asian communities? I'd like to dive into that, but also how you see it playing out clinically also. All of that, the nuances that come with this. I'd love to talk about it.
So speaking on my Filipino heritage and my background, in terms of how we view mental health care, there's obviously a lot of stigma surrounding that, right? And it's often due to how we were raised or how we were brought up. When it comes to mental health, it's often viewed as maybe a sign of shame for the family. Maybe they felt like they didn't do enough to raise their kid in a maybe healthier environment. But oftentimes they don't realize it's kind of like generational trauma that's been passed on from their parents and their parents before them. When it comes to Filipinos specifically, it comes from a place of love, but sometimes it can be in a way where it can cause a lot of unnecessary or overwhelming pressure for their child to be successful, because oftentimes for the Filipino community, oftentimes they are coming from lower class families. They're maybe coming out of poverty. They view their children as a way out for their family. And so they really try to encourage their kids to perform well, do well in school, because it does bring a sense of honor to the family, and hopefully they can kind of get them out of that situation. But unbeknownst to them, sometimes that extra pressure can cause a lot of stress, anxiety, depression for the children. And oftentimes, again, since mental health is how we talked about, we don't really know how to really process that. We don't really know how we should navigate that. So as someone who's Filipino myself, obviously being born and raised here in America, I do feel like I have the capacity to be able to better maybe explain what that is, especially in today's day and age, and hopefully teaching our current parents or grandparents that mental health is not a sign of shame or weakness, but it is a sign of strength, because you're telling yourself that you deserve the ability to be able to seek out whatever it is that gives you strength, and to be able to be okay with asking for help, even when it feels like we don't want to ask for help because we might feel like it's a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. What is the conversation you encourage with, like, maybe grandparents or parents that are still putting a lot of pressure, like on somebody maybe like you that tried to go to nursing school and maybe didn't work out the first time, And then they've got this added weight, I imagine, of this family pressure or the generational pressure around you have to be successful and all that. How does somebody navigate that? What tips, strategies? How do you talk to the grandparents or the parents about that dynamic and how to help yourself help them in your family?
I think the key to navigating those difficult conversations is just first and foremost being able to listen and to acknowledge that the time that they lived in is not the time that we're living in currently. Oftentimes they are still embodying what it meant to live in the Philippines or in America in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whenever they were the prime of their year. But oftentimes it doesn't necessarily translate into the world that we're living in now, the things that are happening in our world. So actually just first and foremost, honoring where they came from, honoring their story, being able to listen to their story, but also letting them know that it's a two-way issue. You have to also be respectful of the generation today, the struggles that they're going through today. It doesn't necessarily mean that one individual's or one generation's struggles is more traumatic or more important than the other individual's struggle, because for whatever reason, I'm starting to see like the people are trying to compete. Well, my struggle was harder. I grew up in World War I or World War II, or I grew up in the pandemic. That it defeats the purpose. We have to learn to understand, yes, all those things were horrible. And I do believe in the future generations are going to have other things that they feel was a pivotal turning point for them. But as long as we can understand that, yes, we all face some form of hardship, but what can we do now is really listen and honor each other's hardship and trying to break that cycle of trauma by just being able to listen to one another and being able to understand that, hey, you're a human being. Well, what can I do to help support you at this point of your life right now? As opposed to finding ways of being like, well, I grew up in this way, so you should also have the same mindset. It's just not realistic.
Absolutely. If you were talking to clinicians out there like me or somebody, a nurse practitioner maybe that's working with Asian communities, what are some concrete sort of practical ways or advice that you could give the clinicians to be able to practice that cultural humility when working with clients from Asian backgrounds or other marginalized communities? Is there advice or strategies that you would recommend for somebody that's maybe not familiar?
I would say just practice cultural humility. Don't act like you know something. If you're not quite sure of yourself, it's better to ask meaningful questions and be curious rather than be judgmental. I think that's just the easiest way to kind of approach it. That way, if you practice in that way, it'll allow the individual to share and be a little bit more open and transparent. And that way we can treat our clients or individuals better. But I think oftentimes we're so very easy to make quick assumptions and judgments. We're not willing to take that extra step to ask them these questions, which in my opinion can make a huge difference in terms of providing whatever like basic care versus something that's really, really, really good, excellent, quality-driven care.
Absolutely. So what would be some questions? Because I think I hear what you're saying, and I also think that clinicians in general are maybe scared of saying something that might be offensive. So maybe they just avoid it altogether. So I'm just curious, like what would be some intro questions into somebody's culture, somebody with an Asian background, cultural background? What would you suggest? What are some like good openers or ways to get used to the culture without worrying about offending somebody or upsetting somebody with asking the wrong questions, if you know what I mean?
I do. And I think you're already hitting the nail on the head there, Kim. So for example, if I'm seeing you, I'd be like, so Kim, tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about where you were born and raised in your own words. And allow yourself, and obviously you tell me how you were born and raised, and I can add leading on questions like, well, how was that for you? Was there anything that you felt was significant during your time? I mean, did you feel like your upbringing, was it positive? Was it something that was challenging for you? If so, what was it that made it positive or challenging or traumatic, whatever the case may be? Instead of me asking specific questions, this, and this, asking more open-ended questions, and then based on whatever the client says, I'll be able to ask in more clarifying or leading questions based off of that.
I love that. Yeah, that's great advice. It really is. And then along those lines, how would you recommend like the faith and spirituality part of it? Because that's something you integrate into the work that you do and you're vocal about it. Do you have suggestions, tips, strategies for navigating that with somebody? Like how do you find out more about their spirituality or their religion or their faith-based or not faith-based? Do you have any tips, strategies around that? And maybe if you've got a particular faith you really adhere to, and how do you not put that on somebody also? I mean, there's like all these kind of landmines around these topics in dealing with clients.
Again, I think the biggest thing is really how you approach the topic. If you come in with a sense of openness and you're coming from a genuine place of wanting to get to know the person better, then regardless of what you identify yourself with in regards to a specific faith, it's never going to offend or shouldn't offend the other person, because the goal is to try to understand, is their faith a form of protective factor for themselves? That's essentially what it is. And how I view faith as well as evidence-based care, it's more complementary rather than adversarial. It's meant to complement each other. The easiest way I can describe it is that, like, when they think of science, it's how things work, the laws of physics or the laws of nature, but faith, it's more about why things the way they are, purpose, ethics, all those different things that we're trying to live our life and trying to find meaning and trying to figure out why we're on this earth. And so it's funny because the more that we dive into evidence, dive into the science of it, we start to understand that there's something bigger than we can maybe explain or understand. And that's where faith, I believe, comes into play. But obviously everyone has their different ways of viewing it. Some people view more spirituality. Some people have specific religions that they adhere to or that they specifically practice. Again, it's all about just respecting whatever that person believes, but also if they do find a lot of strength in their faith, it's something that I always want to encourage and we talk about, because I do feel like when it comes to science and healthcare, the best form of care that I found personally in practice is holistic care, really just trying to focus on treating the human rather than the disease.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love, we're all walking this earth trying to figure out the same thing, like approaching it from humanity in general, like we're all just trying to figure it out, whether I'm, Christian or somebody else is Buddhist or whatever, like it's still the same overall theme of we're just trying to figure it out together and connecting around that humanity instead of like, oh, it's got to be this faith or all of that stuff that I think can really get in the way of good clinical care.
That's the thing that I always try to continue to honor when it comes to working, is that not losing that humanistic approach when it comes to working with clients or individuals. Because at the end of the day, you're going through what you're going through. Everyone has stressors and things, difficult milestones or difficult challenges that they've had to go through. And so if we're sensitive to that, we're willing to understand that everyone's story and journey is different. But at the end of the day, like you mentioned, we're all just figuring out as we go along, and we tend to be kinder to one another. And I do believe that's something that we need in this world, is a little bit more kindness to each other.
I love that so much. That's amazing. So how is your work showing up in your social media? Do you find that you're attracting more like of the Asian community that's maybe looking for mental health treatment, or more providers that are wanting to reach out and be able to treat the Asian community more effectively? Are you seeing that in your audience, or is it a mixture?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture because I pretty much talk about a lot of different things, but obviously when it comes to mental health, it's really this overarching umbrella. So whatever mental health topics that maybe I've done a video on that people may gravitate towards, then that's something that I tend to talk about. But primarily for me, my whole point of my platform is to first and foremost just hopefully empower and inspire people that we can have these type of conversations without having to feel that we're being judged, or having to feel that at the end of the day that we can't respect each other's views when it comes to treating people or when it comes to healthcare and all that stuff. Because I do believe all these things do play a factor in terms of the human experience, especially when it comes to healthcare too, especially with AI that's coming on. And I'm starting to see we're starting to lose a little bit of what makes us special. And that's why I think these type of conversations are very helpful, because we can kind of delegate certain things to AI, but we should never lose touch of what makes human being human. And that's the soul behind the person, right? It's what makes you and I unique in terms of what we're able to offer people.
I think so too. And I think that's why our jobs are safe. I think a lot of therapists or helpers are worried that AI is going to come in and take over their jobs. But it is that humanity, that rapport building, that like deep soul understanding that I don't think AI is ever going to be able to replicate that.
And that's the thing, where you have to understand AI was built by humans. So it's always going to be imperfect, because we're imperfect people. So I always try to tell people as well, try not to strive for perfection, try to strive for excellence, because at the end of the day, that's all we could strive for is excellence. If we're trying to strive to doing something perfect, and I think this ties into kind of like the space that I'm in, especially in social media, right? It's not about having the perfect phone, perfect camera, perfect mic, or the perfect thing that we have to say. You just need to be authentically you. And if you have a message worth sharing, then just share it, because you never know who's behind that screen that can find strength in what you're talking about.
I love talking about that. And part of the point of this podcast is to help support clinicians between sessions. And part of that is we've got to show up on social media. We want to market and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So, I love that conversation and just being able to say it again and again and again. Like, authenticity is the key, especially in a world of AI. And I think even the founder of, or somebody at Instagram recently said, like, they're pushing more content that's just super authentic, raw, and real versus super curated, the filters, everything looks perfect. Because I think humanity's craving that now, especially the more AI comes in and takes over everything that we're doing.
Exactly. I mean, it's a 2016 trend, right? You're seeing it on social media. Everyone loves 2016, even though it's 2026.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're craving a simpler time, even though it was 10 years ago. But I think it shows the direction of humanity and what we're all wanting.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that conversation so much. So everybody listening, just show up and do you. Don't worry about trying to please everybody. And like you're talking about, Jonathan, you've got faith, Asian community, but also just showing up humble and sharing the gifts and the experiences that you've been through, because it's going to help. It's going to help you never know who. Just somebody that shows up and sees your feed, it's going to help them. So thank you for putting that out there into the world.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you had talked about, before we hit record, we were kind of saying you hope to maybe do some coaching down the line and that sort of thing, that you're thinking of getting into that space. And I'm just wondering, where are you seeing the need right now? The calling to get out there and coach, where are you seeing that need that you need to fill, just based on your experience and who you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis?
I think in regards to what I would like to do, and again, there's nothing yet set in stone, but I do feel like there is a need in terms of tying in more holistic approaches when it comes to being a provider, especially in this space. I see there's a lot of niches out there that focuses on teaching new grads in terms of what are some of the things that you should do as a new psych NP, but I also want to talk about what are things that they didn't teach you in school, how to navigate those difficult conversations when it comes to culture, or when it comes to faith, when it comes to trauma, or things that we may have ideas about, but we don't really know how to properly approach it. And I do think that that's something that would make us as clinicians more well-rounded and obviously more grounded as well in our approach. Because again, when patients come to see me, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of them that come in and they tell me Dr. Llamas, you're the first provider that actually asked me how I was actually doing and actually cared about how I'm feeling. You're not just coming in and refilling my medications and then you'll see me in a couple of months. And it's really sad when you hear that, right? And I don't blame other providers. I understand the system, unfortunately, with how it's worked. It's really about how many patients you're able to see. But because of that, we're losing our touch when it comes to our patients. We're not being able to kind of treat them in terms of what they need at that time. We're not really showing up for them at that moment. We're just throwing a bunch of medications at them, and hopefully the medications are working. But for me, medication management is only a small piece of the puzzle. If you're not really listening and you're not really understanding what's going on, that can really skew or really affect how we're able to create an effective treatment plan for them. So that's the reason why I would like to do that, is because I think if we're able to incorporate that more, we'll be more effective.
Absolutely. Yep. I've got chronic celiac disease and autoimmune stuff. And I remember just going doctor to doctor until I found a functional medicine doctor that was a nurse practitioner. And they finally were okay, we got the stress and the gut health, and a lot of this is contributing to some of the mental health symptoms. It occurred to me then, and I kind of knew it as a therapist, but it really occurred to me then. It's we have to have this message of the holistic person. Therapists have it a little bit more, the biopsychosocial piece, but I love hearing somebody that's a nurse practitioner treating with medications is taking that approach. I just think it's so important. And I hope all providers are like that one day.
That's the ideal hope and goal. At the end of the day, if not, then I'm hoping that I'm able to at least fill the need for people who do decide to seek out my care, that I'm able to provide that.
Oh, thank you. How refreshing and wonderful.
Thank you, Ken. No, likewise.
Thanks for taking the time today, Jonathan. Where can people find you if they want to follow you and what you're talking about and learn more about you?
Yeah, they can follow me on my Instagram, Dr. Jonathan V. Llamas. They can also find me on LinkedIn as well, Dr. Jonathan V. Llamas. I'm pretty active on both of those platforms. So if you have any questions or if you just want to reach out, or if there's anything that I can do to help, feel free.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming today.